We'll call to order this City Council work session for the City of East Grand Forks for Tuesday, March 28th, 2023. City Clerk, please call roll.
Mayor Steve Gander.
Here.
Council President Mark Olstead.
Here.
Council Vice President Tim Riopel.
Here.
Council Members Clarence Vetter.
Here.
Ben Pukshavinsky. Here. Dale Helms. Brian Larson.
Here.
Karen Peterson. Here.
Does term quorum. Number 1, review of Valley Golf Lease Agreement Addendum. Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, Council President and Council. FEMA denied replacing the whole cost for the golf cart path. Our insurance did pick up part of it. They paid for half because of the age of the asset and was depreciated. And the reason that FEMA would not pay for it is because in the original lease with the golf course, it says a lessee shall make any and all improvements on said premises and shall maintain said premises at the lessee's expense without any cost or obligation on the lessor's part. So I asked, we discussed it actually because it was a group effort. Jeff Bushy and I have been doing most of this stuff with FEMA. And we talked with Ron to see if he could put an addendum on there so that if this happened again where the golf cart path was damaged by city vehicles because of flood fighting, they have to cross across the golf course to get to the area where the pumps are, and Jason can probably explain this better than I can, but so we put an addendum together so if it ever happens again, we can show this to FEMA that, you know, it says in there that if we specifically damage it because of flood fights, that we are responsible and will maintain that golf cart path. So we're just doing that, and we're getting ready for a possible new flood this spring. So we just want to make sure it's all covered so that FEMA can't say that it's not in the contract. Questions on that? Ron probably can answer better.
I guess I don't know if there's any questions. I would just be, we need to contact Valley Golf Management, and we would enter into this agreement between the city and Valley Golf. I still don't believe that the reason for FEMA to deny payment is valid. There's a big difference between the language of maintenance and actual destruction and repair. And so I believe we're still appealing that. I don't know if they've made a decision on it, but I agree that if this is going to help in the future, that we should do it. I still don't agree with the decision that was made, and if there's anything that I can do in the appeals process, I would really like to address it, because the definitions of both are diametrically opposed. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions? I see none. Thank you so much.
I just want to make a comment on that. Jeff Bush and I did discuss that, and I actually talked to an insurance agent I was actually Valley Golf's insurance agent, and his opinion was that, you know, the insurance covered what they could because of depreciated assets. And we talked with FEMA many times. So Jeff and I discussed it, and we came up with the decision that it probably wasn't worth fighting for FEMA, because we had fought with them many times. We, you know, said that, explained to them many times. So if there's any questions on that, but so the appeal process ended, and I was working on it, and we both discussed that it was probably a moot point. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, we just were button heads, and we just came to the point of this is useless, so let's quit wasting our time on this, and we walked away from it.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Move on to number 2, discussion of interim city administrator position. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Council President. Yes, so at the last work session, I was directed to contact staff to see if there were any internal candidates interested in serving as the interim city administrator. A couple of different reasons. One, you know, we're not the distance for some of the ones that were available. You know, and so several other reasons with that, we decided to look at internal candidates. So with that, I put it out saying if there were any internal candidates, they were to let me know of their interest by Tuesday, March 21st. So in that time period, it did receive three individuals that work for the city that did indicate that they would be willing to serve in that capacity until a new city administrator is in place. They are Reed Hutton, Megan Nelson, and Karla Anderson. So there are some ramifications for the placement of these as far as like pay, those types of things. So I'd be willing to answer any questions the council may have, but that is the internal candidates that we did receive.
Questions at this time from Nelson? I just want to make sure if I made any questions for that. So. I guess one of the things that I have, I did talk to Terry and asked what the process, I guess, would be for out of rank pay, I guess, would call it. I don't know if you have that with you, Mr. Murphy.
I do. Yeah. So since two of the three are members of the union, so the first thing I did is looked at the union contract to see if that the union contract is silent on out of rank pay. So where the union contracts are silent, then the personnel policy applies. So the personnel policy does have a section in it for working out of classification. And it's fairly short, so I'll just read through it real quick if you don't mind. So the purpose of it is to define and delineate circumstances when an employee will receive compensation for the performance of duties in a higher classification than they normally perform. So this would be applicable when the applies to employees of the city unless an existing labor contract specifically provide, which in this case it does not. So A, that compensation for working out of classification is provided as a monetary recognition to employee for the assumption and performance of duties normally performed by an employee of a higher classification. B, the assumption of in performance of the duties, the higher classification must encompass the full range of the responsibilities of the higher classification, meaning it's not a training opportunity, something along those lines. C, the performance of such duties must be for an extended period of time wherein a need exists to fulfill the duties and responsibilities of a vacant position. An extended period of time is generally considered as an assumption of duties and responsibilities that will last in excess of 30 working days, which this would be, this would be the case for this particular situation. D, working out of classification compensation would be shall be allowed only after written recommendation by the department head and concurrence of the city administrator, and recommendations shall be accompanied prior to the assumption of the higher classification responsibilities. E, the employee's compensation will be increased to the starting salary of the higher classification in which the employee is substituting, or 5% over their current pay, whichever is higher. And finally, F, when the temporary assignment is completed, the employee's salary will be readjusted to its previous level, or the level where it would have been attained, including a general salary adjustment with wage range increases if the out-of-class pay has not been made, meaning if they had moved to the next step during that time period, they would go to where they would have been. So that is the rules according to the personnel policy.
I guess the other thing, I did reach out to ask some questions with regards to interims with internal candidates, just for discussion, just see if there was any, and I was provided that verbiage, or explained that verbiage. One other thing that I did ask too, and since we're dealing with an interim city administrator and we're dealing with department heads now moving to this position, the question came up, can these people in a union be in an interim city administrator position? As my understanding, the guidance says no. And maybe Ron can explain it a little bit more. Well, you can explain it better than I can explain it.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know I was contacted after two of the three of the individuals were listed on, as union members in the department head union, on whether or not they should be or available to, or allowed to be in that position. The PELRA, as well as the National Labor Relations Act, indicates that supervisory, managerial, and confidential employees, which would be the city administrator position, are not allowed in unions. Okay? And there's a couple of different reasons for that, but primarily because of the confidential information that that position would hold, being in a union position, and then also to protect the union, that's to protect the city from, like, say, union negotiations and those types of things. The other thing is any type of subversive performances or activities by the managerial employee could pose on the union to be able to protect the union. Now, is it illegal? I can't say that it's illegal. I couldn't find anything that said it was illegal. I would say that between the National Labor Relations Act and the PELRA, it's not advisable that you would have a union department head named as the interim city administrator for those reasons and other reasons. And so I just briefly gave that information to Mr. Olsted and now this group. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions this time or discussion? Mayor Gander.
Don't know if now is the time or not, but I hope there will be an opportunity to maybe peel off a few functions of what the permanent city administrator would do for the one who's interim. Whatever that might look like, if it's HR or any legal or any of that, that could go to another member of our staff or maybe to Mr. Galstead. I would hope that that discussion could take place and that we could peel off just certain functions that an interim wouldn't have to do that others of our team could pick up. Thanks.
Anybody else have anything? Discussion?
Yeah, I guess just to keep the conversation going and taking into account the information that we heard from Mr. Galstead, I believe that Ms. Nelson has a wonderful skill set and is in a position where I think she could help make sure this is a smooth transition. So I would be in favor of Ms. Nelson for this position when we get to the point to make a motion.
I have a question. So if Reed or I were interim administrator, that would mean we're really in that position and not in our position, so we would not be in a union. So has anybody talked to our union representative, Chris Capella, to see if, if you're considered interim administrator, then you're not the director of Parks and Recreation, and I'm not the finance director. So I don't know how that would harp either one of us having the position. Because I believe at one point that when one administrator left, Jerry Skyberg, who would have been in Reed's position, was the interim administrator, and this was not a problem then. So I guess I'm confused. I don't know, but I guess I'm assuming if one of us got the position and we're getting paid as the interim administrator, we would no longer be in the union.
And I know it was a
that, and then he retired,
Oh,
I
okay.
think, within a certain period of time. That's why it was very unique at that time, because I think Jerry was on his way out.
But I'm assuming Reed and I would both assumed if one of us were put in the position, we would no longer be in the union. Is that correct, Reed? I mean, would you assume that? I mean, that would be my understanding.
Thanks, Karla. I don't know if I had thought that much about it, to be honest. It was asked if anyone was interested. I said I'm interested. I feel certainly that I would be interested in it from a career standpoint, myself personally. I can see a lot of reasons why I should be interested in seeing what the position entails and looks like. At first glance, if I was asked to serve in that role, I would certainly consider that would be a requirement is needing to consider if I give up my position in the union or become a non-paying union member, some sort of that. But to be honest, I don't know if I had thought that much about what you all would see happens with the park and rec duties if I was to step into that role, or how that all would look. I would have those questions too. So at this point, I just inserted my name as being interested, and that's where it stands.
Appreciate it.
I guess to a point, then why did we even ask? Because typically in this kind of position, if you're asking somebody internally, it's going to be your management people that would be
I think
interested.
the reason we asked is because we wanted to keep it internally, so we wouldn't have to look out and have people maybe interested in us having to pay for
Right.
ungodly amount of monies that they wanted to come here. I think
And
that
that's
was
why
the
we
backing,
applied.
and Mr. Vetters was the one who started that discussion and wanted to do it that way.
I'm sure that's why the three of us did that, so that the city could save some money.
And we appreciate it. It was a
Right.
question that came up because we talked about what we're going to have to go through this next year in negotiations and other things. So it was a discussion, a question that came up in the midst of, okay, here's what we have. Can these people do it? That was the question.
Okay. Well, it'd just been nice if we'd have known that beforehand, because then Reed and I wouldn't even put our name in if they were just going to throw them out because of our union status.
Well, I guess all I can say is it wasn't known to me at that point. I know there was an issue when the position that has the acting city administrator title to it wanted to go into the union, and that was an issue that was brought up, and it was discussed there as well. So, quite frankly, when this was brought up, I don't know that it was a thought process. Like I said, when we're talking about what was coming up, it was discussed. So, and the question was asked. So, I guess there was no forethought or malice in this thing. It was being deliberately hidden or put out there to like as a bait and switch type of thing. It's just the question was we didn't know who we could have do it. The question was asked, and so here we are.
I never meant that was a bait and switch going on. It'd been nice. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, no, it's good. Mayor, do you have something, sir?
Absolutely. Just a couple things. One, I guess I would reiterate what Mr. Murphy said, and that is we're going sequentially step by step, and we got the clarification from our legal professional as for what that might look like with the union. So again, the same thing. When we started the whole process, it was not known. It became known partway through. Number two, I would think whoever would accept this interim position will need to continue some of their other duties. I can't see that we'd have no park and rec superintendent, or we'd have no finance director, or that we won't have any city clerk functions going on at the time of an interim. So I really don't see how a person could step away completely from their other role, and maybe that's part of why we'll need to pull off a little bit of the city administrator portion to put on to other folks also. So I would think we're going to need, whoever fills this is going to carry part of their previous work right into this office, right into this role in these months that will happen. So yeah, that's what I think is going to have to happen. Thanks.
Anybody else have any discussion? Mr. Riepel?
My conversations with other communities who I've talked with said they would not allow a union member to take over as a city administrator position. They would either have to resign or from the union at that point if they were to get it, and I don't know what good, because they're still going to have to do this other job, like you said. But they unequivocally said no. So.
Else have anything? Mr. Bitter?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think it boils down to we need to, like the mayor said, define what roles of the city administrator we want this interim to actually fill. I think a lot of the duties of the city administrator are just going to sit on the wayside for now, and there's going to be very few of the job duties of the city administrator that this interim is actually going to have to partake in. I don't see it as a lot. I think, top of my head, I'm thinking that they're more of a clearinghouse that if questions come up this is the person that you go to as long as we don't have a city administrator, and the interim then is going to direct them to where they need to go, be it council president, mayor, one of the other department heads, what have you.
I agree.
I think that's maybe the next step, is we have to define what roles this interim's actually going to partake in.
You know, I thought about that too, is what roles would they have, what they could do, and no matter who it is in there, like if, let's say it's a disciplinary action or some legal, or something that with any staff, my thought, okay, do we have them go to HR and then Mr. Gall said come step in and assist with that? So that's one of the things I thought of, is like, okay, no matter who it is, if it's an internal, it's how do we handle that? So that key is confidential, you know. In what thought HR and Mr. Gall said, this is one of the thoughts that came to my head right away. So
I think we could even stipulate that this interim city administrator would not, for example, do any performance evaluations on our department heads, would not be terribly involved in, such as in your employment history, this is a demerit right here for your deficient performance. There will be none of that. This is not the role of an interim city administrator. Unless something really egregious would happen, then somebody'd have to step in and do that. But as you say, this is to basically take us from here until there. And then this individual, I think, will also be a very important asset in bringing the new administrator up to speed. That's going to be an important role also.
Karla?
Well, I'm discussing with Chris Capella, our agent, and he could work, discuss this with you on how, if you choose Reed or I, that it could work. So I'm just leaving that on the table. So there could be discussion on that. You could take a temporary leave from the union, or just like you said, depending on what kind of duties are going to be done. But I guess Reed and I are both qualified to do it, so I'm kind of surprised that we would just throw out our names because of the union issue. So, thank you.
Anybody else have anything to discuss? To move to adjourn this meeting. Moved by Repel.
Second.
Second by Larson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion is carried. Meeting's adjourned. We'll move into the special meeting. Call to order the special meeting of the City of East Grand Forks for March 28th, 2023 is now 5:22. City Clerk, please call roll.
Mayor Seegander.
Here.
Council President Mark Olstead.
Here.
Council Vice President Tim Riepel.
Here.
Council Members Clarence Vedder.
Here.
Ben Pakshavinsky. Dale Helms. Brian Larson.
Here.
Karen Peterson.
Does determine quorum. Number one, consider appointing an interim city administrator. Does anybody have any thoughts or discussion on this, with how you want to handle this then, and go from there? I know Mr. Larson.
Yeah, are you looking for a motion with a name? Is that what you're looking to get the conversation going?
Then have a discussion, yep.
Okay. Yeah, I would make a move for Ms. Nelson.
Okay, there's a motion, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Riepel. Okay, questions and discussion. I guess one of my things is, that I asked too, is what if something steps into this, no matter who it is, what would be, how would we pay them? And you discussed that a little bit, what actually those ranges are and the scales are. So I reached out to and asked the question, and I don't know if you have them or not.
Yeah, I do. So it says that, so working on a classification compensation would be allowed after the written recommendation, and then it would be increased to the starting salary of the higher classification in which the employee is substituting, or 5% over their current salary, whichever is higher. So in this particular case, with the name that was brought forward, that would go to step 1 of grade 25. That is the higher classification.
Even in the process of this, doing it, would that person start that when you leave, or is that from now after it gets voted on moving forward? I guess I'm looking for a time.
It would be,
We don't know when it's going to end, but I'm just saying.
it would be when I leave, when they would take over that position.
Okay, so
it'd be
April 22nd?
April 24th.
Fourth? Okay. I guess I didn't know.
And if we decide to go ahead, we'll probably call the question and make a vote here. Just know that the fitness to be interim, if indeed we're concerned about the legal ramifications, does not carry to the fitness to be in the permanent position, right? So if anybody didn't get elected by the council to serve as our permanent city administrator, does not take them out of the running to become the permanent city administrator as a next step. You know, we're going through the process right now with the group that's identifying the city administrator, and there are some really cool things that happen when you promote from within, if that can happen. So we're not afraid to go to the outside and bring in a very experienced one, but we're also receptive to an internal hire for the permanent position. And again, just please don't think for a minute this excludes anybody from holding that permanent position.
Person, you have something there, sir?
Yeah, I would just like to add to make sure it's on the record that I'm also strongly in favor of internal candidates, and I would really encourage Ms. Anderson and Mr. Hutton to apply for the position, not the interim position, but for the position of city administrator. I think you both would be wonderful candidates, and I think that's a better fit. Thank you.
Mr. Vetter?
Thank you. I'd like to go back to the salary. I need more clarification on that. Are your current position, Mr. Murphy, you're not on a scale per se, are you?
Yes, yep, I'm on grade 25.
Okay.
So it's part of the pay scale, but it's the,
I thought it was a contracted position and didn't have a scale to it, so
No.
I apologize. Okay, that makes sense then.
What step are you at, if we could ask?
I'm on step 8.
Okay, thank you.
Have any discussion? I see none. Oh, go ahead, Karen, go ahead.
Just based on what are we forming this decision on? Are we looking at what qualifications for this interim one are we basing the information on? I'm just curious.
I think my understanding with the city interim position is that they're not going to be somebody could be an acting or retired city administrator, but we're more reason with Mr. Vetter suggesting that we go interim instead of going out. I think we're looking at this position as someone that could step in and take care of stuff while we're looking, not someone that's going to be, I guess, having to do all the duties that administrator was doing, because there's going to be a lot of things that we're going to pass off to either Terry or Ron or some other department. So that was my thought process when we're looking at interim stuff. And Ms. Nelson has worked closely with Mr. Murphy and knows everything that goes on and is an integral part of how that operates and then administrative side of it. So I think with her having the years been here and her knowledge of everything of what we need to do, I think she's very capable of doing that.
So if I could, one thought too on the back end, not knowing who the permanent hire will be. Let's say it's internal or external. Megan would be a really good one to help that transition to the permanent administrator, whoever comes in here. I think arguably because she is in close proximity would even make a better one to make that transition than someone coming in from another area. I know, Karla, you're close too, but as you said, Mr. Oles said, Megan's worked really closely with the city administrator, and that's good.
Can I make another comment? I did send my resume to David Murphy when we asked for that, so that people could see my qualifications. So I have my master's, which is typically what somebody usually has in that position. So I'm just going to hand it out because David did not share it with you.
Anybody else have any questions? Discussion? All right. No other questions or discussion? I'll ask for a roll call,
Olsted,
please. Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
Peterson, Better,
Yes.
Pakshavinsky, Riepel.
Carried. Entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, sorry, I forgot,
One thing.
Mayor.
I'm so sorry. I'm actually not so sorry. One thing. And Megan, thank you for providing this for me. Thank you, President Olsted, for almost remembering to call on me at the end of this meeting. Karla Tice, along with Patty and James, on behalf of the Listen Center, have made us aware of World Down Syndrome Awareness Day. I'm not sure how it happens, but the people I know who have Down syndrome are some of the most kind and loving people. They are not afraid to give hugs, and they are almost always cheerful. I appreciate their lighthearted and uncomplicated view of life, especially when we're dealing with the challenging issues here at City Hall. Thanks a lot, Mark. I think the message is that we all need each other with our own unique gifts and abilities. Working together, we can accomplish more and have more fun than if we work alone. My friend David has cerebral palsy. David is among the most intelligent people I know. He is a tenaciously hard worker. David's cerebral palsy has affected his motor function and it's made speech more difficult, but it hasn't touched his enthusiasm or decreased his productivity. David says that we all have some sort of disability. Some are just more obvious than others. Looking in the mirror, I must agree with him. So here's the proclamation for World Down Syndrome Awareness Day, which was officially last Tuesday. Perhaps next year we can get ahead of it and do a special observance. So here I have a proclamation. World Down Syndrome Awareness Day, March 21st, 2023. Whereas Down syndrome is a genetic disorder affecting 1 in over 700 babies, or approximately 6,000 births in the U.S. every year. And whereas occurring from an individual having a full or partial extra copy of chromosome number 21, Down syndrome is a naturally occurring chromosomal arrangement and is one of the most common chromosomal conditions. And whereas individuals living with Down syndrome are independent, valuable, and active members of our communities who are dignified participants as a wide range of educational, occupational, social, and recreational activities. And whereas the date 3/21 represents the uniqueness of 3 copies of chromosome 21 and celebrates individuals with Down syndrome. And whereas individuals with disabilities have the right to be treated fairly and have the same opportunities as everyone else, working with others to improve their lives. Now therefore I, Steve Gander, Mayor of East Grand Forks, Minnesota, proclaim March 21st as World Down Syndrome Awareness Day in East Grand Forks, and I encourage my fellow citizens to come together to raise awareness and promote the well-being and success of individuals with Down syndrome and their families. Dated March 21, 2023, Stephen Gander, Mayor. Karla, Patty, James, and David, thank you for your friendship. Thank you for all the good that you bring to our community. Thanks for your civic pride. I see them at so many of our community events. And please know that I am proud of you as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. Now we can entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Vetter, second by Riepel. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion is carried. The meeting is adjourned.